He is a cinematographer hailing from New York, whose work has swept major film festivals since 2016 Southern Gothic film The Eyes of My Mother, which premiered at Sundance. And you got Spirit Awards, Camerimage International, Cannes, Toronto, Telluride. The features he lends has made waves at them all. His latest film garnered #1 box office results and currently sits at a very favorable 90% rating among critics, according to Rotten Tomatoes. Today, the camera points at the cinematographer, though technically he is running his own setup. Zach Kuperstein, thank you so much for being here today, sir.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Before we actually get started into the movie stuff, we both wanted to say congratulations for two reasons. Number one, we heard you got engaged. And number two, you got engaged in August. It's like the best month in the world. So double congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it was a beautiful month, beautiful engagement, and very happy to get married soon.
All right, I'm living through you two guys now. There we go.
No, you're not. You're never.
I can never have enough.
Yeah. Okay, so you wrote and shot and cut a short film in 2009 called TV Dinner. It stayed busy, and you stayed busy in various camera department roles until making festival headlines in 2016. Can you tell us about that time and what made you want to be a cinematographer to begin with?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you're going way back. So TV Dinner was a high school movie I made, just, me and some friends, and somehow that got on IMDb, and that's fine. I guess, they all kind of started with picking up a camcorder, my dad's camcorder. I was just happy to be filming something, and I loved making things with my hands and doing things and kind of putting the pieces together and telling stories. And there was a point where I wanted to be a magician, and I think the performance part of it gave me anxiety, but doing the tricks and knowing the behind the scenes of things was really exciting. So filmmaking just kind of seemed like a natural fit when I put a lot of those hobbies together, like woodworking and still photography as well. And so TV Dinner was something that I made in senior year in high school, and sort of a culmination of TV video classes, learning how to use Final Cut, shooting stuff with camcorders, going to like a summer program for film with some friends, and got some of those friends involved to make this thing with a DVX 100. And I think we had the Red Rock Micro 35mm adapter. I don't know if you guys were around.
No, I'm not familiar with the adapter. What is was that the camera you use? Is that the model of the camera you used that you mentioned first?
I was wondering the DVX 100. Yeah, that was the Panasonic. It was the first like prosumer 24p camera. And it was like, oh my God, we can shoot 24 frames a second. This is crazy. But all on mini DV tape and standard def. And it looked great as is. But then we were like, but you get the depth of field if you shoot with the 35mm adapters. Did you get to play with those?
No, I was stuck on the DV tapes because I'm just wondering if you ever had any nightmare scenario happen with the DV tapes of dumping the footage and there being some kind of like digital noise or messed up at the wrong place or anything, all the things that we run into when we were stuck with the DV tapes.
Yeah, there were definitely things I taped over. That was not good. I was like, oh my God, that was the tape from,
You talked about picking up that camera for the first time. Let me ask you this. Did you have that realization? I don't know if he had it, but I talked to him about it all the time. The realization I had when I first picked it up. I first got my first camera. I'm like, yes, go time, filmmaker time. And then you come to camera, you're like, wait a minute. This does not look how it looked on TV and on the film. I got a lot of fucking work to do.
Yeah, exactly. No, I definitely had that realization pretty quickly. And I think the biggest thing for me in that realization was camera movement. I was like, I want the camera to like move, slowly and have this like control over it. And the idea of a dolly movement was mind blowing to me. And I was watching all these like YouTube videos and like how-to tutorials early on like how to make your own dolly and make your own jib. And I did those things. So I made like a skateboard dolly with used rollerblade wheels, and the rollerblade I got at the dump, and like pieces of wood I got, for free, and like just kind of pulled the pieces together and put it on PVC pipe. But we made some really great little like dolly moves that way. And then I made a jib out of a bed frame, just to like bolt the pieces together. And again, it was all about making stuff and doing stuff with my hands, but then kind of discovering camera movement through that, and sort of the precision of camera movement, and that elevated a lot for me. And then that, along with the depth of field with the 35mm adapter, it was like when that all clicked together, that really felt like we were making a movie, much more than just picking up the Handycam. But I think even so, the sequencing of things and the capturing of the story and being able to put that together in the edit was really exciting for me, even from the beginning, without those technical things. So.
What's the most interesting thing that you like? Because in the beginning, like thinking like back to 2009 and maybe even before that, where you don't have the equipment yet, but you still have the ideas. So you use what's around. And I know you're talking about like PVC pipe and the YouTube tutorials to make these actual contraptions that could do what you want. I think the craziest thing that I ever did was sit on a lawnmower that happened to be at the house we were shooting at. And it worked as the perfect, like I sat on it, somebody pulled me backwards, and it was one of the most beautiful shots that I've ever captured up to that point. And I was just wondering if there was any like makeshift things like that that you ran into in the early days.
Yeah, I mean, the dolly and the jib were absolutely makeshift. I think we also made a Steadicam. Me and some buddies, we like figured out, oh, we can like take a gimbal and put some weights on a threaded rod, and we even made like a spring-loaded arm on a wooden vest that we made. It was pretty wild to just like to make all of the equipment from scratch. Yeah, and I think like there was a film that a friend of mine directed, and I was the DP on, and we kind of switched back and forth in high school. And in his film, it was called Hills of Iron, and there was like the central premise is this guy like starts constructing things out of this rusty steel he's found in his barn, and he got some guy with like a scrapyard to drop off like a literal ton of metal into the barn, and then I think it was like his brother's girlfriend or something was a welder or something like that, and she was able to like make this crazy sculpture in the barn, and then that, I don't know, that became like the centerpiece of the film. And I don't know, there's sort of scrappiness like that you do all along the way.
Yeah, that's awesome though. That's what you have to do to make it look like you have more of a budget than you do when you're doing independent film. A lot of the times is start with what your resources are and then build off of that. So yeah, and then have something like that come together is pretty cool.
With TV Dinner, there's a scene where we did like a TV wall. So it's sort of like a horror movie about a family that turns into TVs because they're so addicted to watching television. And the daughter of the family is upset with that, and as it's sort of like a fever dream where they turn into TVs and everything around her is a TV. But we collected a bunch of TVs and built them up on this platform outside of a window, and she like looks out the window. It's sort of like if there was a jump scare in the movie, that would be the jump. And it's like, oh my god.
I mean, doesn't sound scary to me. Sounds like a fun time. Turn it into a TV. I'd love to turn it into a TV.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'd love to turn it into a game.
Actually, I should show you guys. I have a poster for the movie that I made.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
Check it out. I couldn't find anything on Google on that one.
Hangs on the wall.
Actually, I got some for you guys.
Oh, that's
there
awesome.
we go. Okay.
Let me see a dastardly blend of mundane Americana and what is that? Spectral discomfort.
Spectral discomfort. Yeah.
That's a great headline. Is that a real TV that you used in the film on the cover?
That one was like I think Google Images, like old TV, but on the left side of it, that was the TV wall and the actress.
Now,
that's awesome.
It's been over 25 years for to get this man sued. He took it off Google Images. He's made it this far, and you ask him about it nearly 11 years later. But no, I think we have a subject on the show called Film School, and I think it's speaking with you and them hearing how, like I say, you started from the beginning, and just it's the discovery of things. And like I say, I really love that, because on a film set, we all know this, things won't always go as they're supposed to, and you have to harken back to those days when you had to build stuff. Now, I know he rattled off about nearly maybe 25 projects during the time that you've been working on. Some are IMDb, some aren't. So what I wanted to know was, during the 25 years, what's one of the biggest 25 projects expanding? What's one of the biggest lessons you've learned as far as being a cinematographer?
Oh,
I mean, I know there's been a lot, but if there's like one stand rule, you know what I'm saying? If he dies, he dies. Like, it's like rules that people, like mantras that people have. You go on a set, because every director's different, every set's different, every budget's different. So what would be one, maybe not one thing you've learned, but what are some of the key things I'd say that you've learned throughout the time?
I think that the key mantra is ABL, always be learning. So it's
Yeah.
every day is a new thing and a moment of discovery and a moment of growth. And I from the most recent project that I just wrapped to back in 2009, it was finding new things and being inspired every day, not just creatively, but technically, and learning from the people around you. Being open to that, I think, is really important. That's probably the easiest, shortest version of a life
yeah,
lesson
that's
with you.
whether you're working with $100 or $100 million, that's a concept that still holds true too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me ask you this now. The Eyes of My Mother, which released in 2016, was the first feature film.
Said it's essential.
Well, I have to do that, man. It's my calling, because that's my mantra, my voice. Leave me alone. All right. The Eyes of My Mother, released in 2016, was the first feature film that you worked on. Now, let me ask you this. What was the undertaking like in comparison to the shorter productions you had previously been working on, in stark comparison to this?
Well, I will say first that it was actually the second feature that I worked on. It was the first one that got released. 5 Doctors shot before it, but both within the same year. But I also want to say it's fun the way you said "Eyes of My Mother," and I remember the first AC on that. He would turn to me and just look at me and goes, "The eyes of my mother." And I love that. Sometimes he just texts me today and be like, "Eyes." But yeah, so in doing 5 Doctors, which was really the first feature for me, and that was like yes, it is a longer form thing. It's more shooting days, it's more endurance, and it's more planning and more money, and it's a lot. It's a lot to take on, and I drew a lot from my experience as a camera assistant on features, and talked a lot with some of my mentors. A friend of mine named Brendan Roots is a great DP. He shot 4 or 5 features that I AC'd on. And so I went straight to him. I was like, what do I need to know? Like, how do I do it? And he was like, the main thing is that you really need to befriend the production department, because they're going to be the gatekeepers on what can happen, what you can make happen, what you can't do. And then I kind of realized how important prep is, and how important it is to communicate the vision and what you want to accomplish, so that everybody else can be working to support that. And it's my job as the DP to take the director's vision and communicate that and execute on it. And if I can't make that clear to everybody and communicate that effectively, then it's not going to happen. So there has to be that prep time that's built into it. And it has to be as planned as possible, because everybody's going to ask all the questions, and they started asking the questions too soon. You're never ready for it. But then as the planning proceeds, and as you kind of get into the nitty gritty of things, then you start to have answers for things. And it's great to have those answers. It's really, it shows confidence. It shows confidence in the vision and in the director. And it allows the production to move forward and to make smart decisions and to be efficient and to spend the money wisely and be safe and safely. But I think for like a long form project in particular, as coming off of shorter projects, you do have to realize that the endurance is a big aspect of it. And it's not just physical endurance and mental endurance personally, but it's of the crew. And it's really important to be able to motivate the crew through the entire project. And I've seen it where people check out and then they don't do as good work. I've seen it where actors check out and don't do as good work. And it's because they lose confidence in the director and in the DP and in the AD. And it's either the vision isn't strong, or everybody just has a bad attitude or something, or there's too many egos involved. And it's just so important on a feature and a TV show and anything long form to maintain like good morale, and so much of my job is people management more than technical or visual anything. It's just making people feel good, feel part of the team, and making sure that I'm having fun so that they can have fun, and we're all there to make a movie. So that was probably the biggest difference going into a feature.
I tell people that financial advisors aren't the most important people to handle things. It's people, like you say, cinematographers, DP. When you have to manage egos, that's the biggest portfolio in the world.
Oh, and yeah, that's so true. Like when you've got like a 2 or 3 month production, keeping everybody happy, especially on an independent film where they might not be getting paid that much or at all, like making everybody feel at least seen and heard and good morale. That's a very good point.
Or there's that one key grip that comes over to him, like, we are getting this in a wide shot, right? Like, you get the fuck out of my face, bro.
Yeah, but to that
Yeah.
person, you gotta be open to those ideas, and I
Yes,
think like
very true, very
people
true,
really
very true.
respond to that, and like
You have to appear open to those ideas.
Next thing you know, they're coming to you every day. Hey man, you know what I was thinking? No, tell me.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned the key grip though, because the key grip on the last project I worked with, his name is David Askey, and he was so influential and like constantly had little ideas, and he was just a little bird in my ear and had like little seeds of, oh, what if we lit like this? Or did you see this reference? This, your photography is kind of reminding me of this. Should we go in that direction? Or like, are you going to get this shot in the mirror? And I was like, yes,
But I
yes,
love
yes
that
to
though.
all of those things. Like I
Yeah.
love.
I love that because guess what? I tell people this, at least younger people are getting into film. Like, you know, those credits that roll at the end, try to get familiar with what everyone does, because the more you know, like you say, just because somebody's a key grip, they may be one day a director, and you have to work your way up through these titles in each department and know what's going on. So it's good that you run into it. That key grip will probably be a director 10 years from now. We'll
Yeah.
probably be interviewing him.
So tell us about Sundance.
So Sundance, yeah, Sundance is interesting. You know, I think from a cinematographer's perspective, it's fine. I think the festival is very much above the line focused, which I understand. It's about selling the product, and the people trying to sell the movies are using the talent and the director and the writer and the producers to sell the movie. So I'm such a small part of that that it's it's sort of a bummer, because you might show up with the expectation of like, I worked so hard, I put my heart and soul into this creative collaboration was like everything, all this and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And then you kind of you have to like fight to get a ticket to the premiere.
That's great.
Were you on craft services? That was like, no, cinematography.
I'm really surprised to hear that, because like you think with Sundance it would be like, that'd be a place where you would expect people to appreciate the ones in the scrolling credits, that to know what they did and appreciate their contribution to it, and you can get those accolades there. That's crazy.
I think there's definitely recognition to be had, and I think it's definitely, it was really satisfying, and it probably, I mean, maybe one of the most amazing experiences I've had was seeing Eyes My Mother premiere there, and sitting in the audience with a packed house, people seeing it for the first time. It was my first time seeing it on a huge screen, and like that was a mind-blowing experience, and really like the highest high possible as a creator, to sit there with people and watch them react and watch them like, there's this, I think it was the gaffer on my left and the AD on my right, and in front of me was this woman who had no idea what she was in for. And that movie in particular was kind of funny, because the way they pitched it was as a sort of, the blurb read as like a dysfunctional family story. Like there's no sense of it being horrifying or disturbing at all. So people walked out of the screening, and we kind of knew they were going to, because there's like some intense moments, and I don't
That's
think
a good headline.
wanted to be part of that. Yeah. But the woman in front of me, I just remember her like, oh, I can't watch. I can't look at this. This is horrible. Let's go. And I'm
use the eyes of my mother if you can't watch.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gripping the crew's hands, and I'm like, yes, this is the best. And it's because awesome. We know that we're affecting her. Like the work that we've done, like got in her brain and got in everybody there's brain. And I know that we're going to cause some nightmares, and like, that's a cool feeling. So there's nothing kind of beats that. The whole like fanfare of the parties and the exclusivity of it all, and the hype around like press and selling stuff, like it doesn't really appeal to me. And maybe there are other DPs who can capitalize on that better than I could, but it's a little bit frustrating. But I will say, on the flip side, Camerimage, the festival in Poland for cinematography, is awesome, and like that's where
my people. I love what you said though, because again, I think me and him, if you've ever made a film and been lucky enough to have anybody come see it, I don't care what any creator or director says. We always say stuff like, "Oh, I don't care what people think," but the moment you're in that packed house and you're there wondering what this audience thinks, you're looking for, are they laughing at this part, frightened at this part, and you hit it on the head. There's no drug known to man that will give you that high just to see the satisfaction, like it worked, and you build on that confidence, or build on that, like, man, they hated that shit. I can build on it.
It's like a magic trick too. It's like if you could pull off the illusion enough to affect somebody,
right?
Then it's like, yeah, we did.
I did it. Yes.
There was nothing. We made something, and now that woman is crying.
Right. And it's collaborative process, as he mentioned. Yes.
Yeah.
Let's celebrate.
In 2020, you worked on a film called Paper Spiders. This was with Peyton List, Lily Taylor, Tom Papa, among others. It's critically acclaimed. It has a 100% rating among critics on Rotten Tomatoes. All the audience reviews are raving. It's available on Starz and Amazon Prime if you want to check it out. You should check it out. It currently sits at a worldwide gross of $3,000. And then 2 years later, you have Barbarian, which brought in nearly $46 million on a budget of $5 million. These are two great films with two wildly different results. And I was wondering, what sense do you make out of something like that? And if it has an effect on you as a filmmaker when you're going into a project?
Yeah, I mean, there is no sense in that, right? It's like, it's just, it's hard to predict, and it's circumstance that can lead one project to be wildly successful and another one not to be, financially. But obviously both were well received. I didn't know that about Paper Spiders being 100% of Rotten Tomatoes until you asked that. I don't know. You never know what's gonna work for people, and all I can do is read the script and meet with the director and decide that I want to invest my time and energy into the person and into the script. And with Paper Spiders, I really fell in love with the script. It was very personal to Inan, the director, and I really liked working with him. And he had like such a good vibe, and he's so collaborative and great ideas. And I feel like, I'm sad for him that the movie wasn't more successful, but I feel like I'm really proud of it, and I know he's really proud of it. And I think it's a cool and really personal story that we told it. And it's it felt like that. There was something very real about it. So that holds a lot of value for me. And yeah, it's, it is about affecting and as a lot of people and as many people as possible. But even the people who I know who have seen it were really moved by it, and that means a lot to me. So feel good about that. And then Barbarian, on the other hand, like similarly, I read the script and met with Zach, the director, and was like, wow, he's amazing. The script is amazing. Like this, I think this is going to be really successful. And a lot of people didn't, and if you've heard Zach tell the story of the financing of it and how it didn't happen so many times, and then it happened, and then it didn't happen again, and then it happened. It's like, total miracle stuff that like movies are made on. I don't know, what works, what doesn't. And I think, a lot of the circumstance around Barbarian being produced by New Regency and their deal with Disney and 20th Century is just circumstance and amazing, and the right people at the right time, the right place to kind of elevate it and market it and put it out there in a way that got a lot of people to see it. And I think the script also has a something about, like all the twists sort of have this like word of mouth thing about them. Like when you see Barbarian, you're like want to tell somebody to see it, and I think that helped a lot to get it out there.
That's crazy. It's just such a stark difference, and I was genuinely hoping you had an answer, because we struggle with that on we've made independent films and put them out there, but what really like irks me is we've been doing this like YouTube thing for about 2.5 years now, and playing with different things, and it just never makes any sense what like hits the algorithm just right. Like we put hours and hours of time into research and post-production and production on something, and it gets 17 views, and then I'll do a 3-minute video with my daughter on TikTok and it's sitting at 40,000. I'm like, what the hell? Where's
this brown nose of this algorithm we've been looking for? We're looking for it. We're looking for it here. Let me ask you this. It's been said that the only time a bunch of people in the room all trying to direct something really works well is an orgy. But however, I know you're asking where I'm going with this. Within was released in 2021, shot during the pandemic, about the life in the pandemic. Now, it's an anthology film from numerous writers and directors, starring names like the great War Machine himself, Don Cheadle, Julianne Moore, and the very, very beautiful and lovely, talented Rosie Perez, who actually wrote and directed a segment. Now, you are the only credited cinematographer. So let me ask you this. How did it work coordinating with all these different moving parts, different moving people, and different moving, if there were, egos?
Great question. I like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Within was an interesting project. It was done entirely remotely. The conceit of the project was, let's have a bunch of actors write, direct, and shoot their own short films in their own homes using an iPhone. So my job was less as cinematographer and more as consultant. I didn't actually shoot anything myself on the project. I only consulted and essentially helped all these actors learn how to make movies, because a lot of them, despite having been in front of the camera many times, hadn't been behind the camera and didn't really know what to do with the camera, and how to put pieces together, and how to tell a story both technically and emotionally, make that work on camera. A huge part of it was technical, though. It was sending them a small kit, a case of some lighting stuff, but I really tried to keep it simple. There was so originally, when I was approached about the project, a friend of mine was producing it, and she was just like, hey, like, what kind of gear would you send people to like make a thing, and this was, during lockdown. So, it was all kind of hypothetical, and I had no work, and, it was like, what are we doing? And she was like, should we send them like LEDs? So what kind of lights can we send them? I was like, really, people would be much better off working with their existing lights, and let's give them a couple of light bulbs, a dimmer, and some like muslin, which is like a white fabric, and duvetine, which is a black fabric, and have them like, be able to shape and affect the lighting around them, rather than try to add too much artificial light. Because I think if you don't know what you're doing with light, and you are given a light, you usually just shine it at something and it doesn't look great. Yeah. So I felt like people would be more successful if they were given more basic tools, and tools to kind of just alter the light and affect the area around them a little bit. And then from the camera side, it was just an iPhone. I think it was whatever the latest iPhone was, the iPhone 13 or Max or whatever had just come out. It had the 3 different lenses on it, and that was kind of nice. And then we got a little rig to like put a wide or a telephoto lens onto that, so you could get a little bit extra.
Yeah. I think all the actors in that film now, number one is like, you know what, maybe I shouldn't complain about why we've been sitting around this long. They're setting up the lights and everything like that. Now they get this. And number two is they get to come in on the other side of it and see, like, listen, it takes all of us to do this. You can have the best scene in the world. If it's not lit correctly, or the shot soft, or I'm not tracking you correctly, you can kiss that Oscar goodbye. And you better have a ticket for me to the next damn festival we go to. Let them know who you are.
Yeah, no, I think it was a learning experience for everybody, for sure. And I think from the technical side of it, I was able to provide them, the how-to, but it was really cool to see the ideas that different people had. And I tried to lean into, like, I don't want to make each one of these short films the same. I'd rather help them, visualize their idea of a film. And the scripts were so varied. There was like a horror film and a drama and a comedy, and just all kinds of different ways of telling a little story in their homes. And it was fascinating to really see people understand, like, whoa, that is what goes into it. And it was fascinating for me to be allowed access and invited into their homes, and to be able to give them that. And I tried to be as kind and patient about it. I think there were definitely some technical hurdles, and I was going through a time with my mom as well, who's not very technically savvy, and trying to, teach her about some, like, how to use Zoom or anything. I mean, that's advanced, to be honest, but all kinds of things. And it really took a lot of, like, okay, let's slow it down. Let's find a way to show the details. And my fiance, who was my girlfriend at the time, she was very helpful to making this sort of user manual for how to make a movie. She was able to be sort of my guinea pig in some ways, because she doesn't know how to make movies. And I was like, well, here, if I explain it this way, does that make sense? And she was like, no, like, I don't really get that. And I was like, okay, well, if I break it down and show this photo of this part of the phone, does that make more sense? Yeah, okay, that works. So I think that having her as a test subject and helping me with the user manual, and then advising this way that was gentle, helped a lot.
He may not ask it, but I'm going to ask this. Without naming the person, was there one particular person that you kept saying, like, didn't they get the fucking kit? We went through the shit last night. We went down. They're an A-lister, but not in my book. They're an ass. So like, don't say the person. But was there one situation, like, how are they not getting this?
Don
Yes.
Cheadle, like, man, this
At
light
least-
won't turn on.
Yes, but I don't think I wasn't ever frustrated with them for
Okay.
not getting it. It was more, it was just surprising. And I could see from each and every one of them how much they really wanted to get it. So it wasn't for lack of trying, you know, and,
Okay.
and I
Okay.
understand there are some things that are like hard to grasp. And if you're not technically savvy, it's extra hard to grasp, but I get that. So it wasn't.
I'm sure there was a conversation where it was like, look, I'm not frustrated with you. The situation is just kind of frustrating. I know.
And
I
we're
could
all in
imagine.
lockdown. Like nobody could leave their
Yeah,
houses,
yeah,
and like
right.
you know.
Oh,
it was
trust me,
stressful for
man.
everybody to begin with.
I've done remote tech support,
Oh,
and
God.
it's so hard to do something when you're not like physically there to like put your hands on something or the
Yeah.
person that
Oh, yeah. I've gotten to the point where like I'll just buy it for you. Just wait, I'll send you a new one because I'm not finna go.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get into Barbarian. I know you kind of already touched on a little bit like how you got involved with the project, but I was curious if you knew of like Whitest Kids You Know or Zach Kreger going into it and how that connection happened.
I didn't know about What Is Kids You Know or Zach, and the connection happened because the producers, Rafi and JD, who have their company Boulder Light, they produced The Vigil, which is another horror movie that I shot, and really got to know them through that project, and we had stayed in touch, and we were kind of mutual fans of each other and wanted to do something again, and they brought the script to me, and I was the timing worked out, and I was kind of lucky enough that they brought me to Zach and Zach to me. And the funny thing is I was late for our first interview, and I am never late. I'm like really insist on being on time, but I was out walking the dog, and it was kind of like still lockdown-y pandemic time. And I like ran back I was out in the field and saw an email from him just like, hey, are you still coming to the I was like, I just like ran back down the block and sat down, and I was totally out of breath, and sat down at the computer and turned it on, and was like, hey man, I'm really sorry, the dog, you know, blah blah. He's like, it's fine. And then I think he I forget whether he commented on it or not, but I think he was more offended somehow by my t-shirt. I had like a Doors shirt on, and he was like, he kept making fun of me for that. I don't know why. But
That's funny to hear that. Just watching all of it there, when they started doing the podcast during the video podcast during the pandemic, he seemed like he was the very particular one at the group that would just get really fixated on something. They get frustrated, or not frustrated is the wrong word, but he would
Fixated.
Yeah. He was just the he's that guy in the group that'll call you out on your shit, be really particular about something.
We really hit it off, though. I would say, like, aside from me being late and the t-shirt, it was a really good first meeting, and I could tell like he had such a clear vision for the script, and since he wrote the script, he had just great ideas about where he wanted to go with it, and was super clear on that. And you're right, he can fixate on something, but for good reason, and I really appreciated that. I could see that in him. So truly, it was an incredible collaboration, and I can't wait to work with him again. I think it's gonna be fun.
Now, speaking of working with him again, now from all the research I did, this Barbarian may have just, of course, been released, but it's been 10 years in the making from everything I researched as far as him trying to get it prepared. And speaking of preparation, it seems like you're very big yourself on preparations, from discussions with the director, shot listing, photo boarding, and all these things before the camera rolls. So let me ask you this: what is the greatest advantage to knowing how much work has been put in before and how much work's going to go into it before the cameras even roll, versus showing up like, okay, so what are we doing? What's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, it's efficiency is the biggest advantage, and just especially on an independent film, you don't have time ever to do anything. So if you can spend that time, you do have to spend that time somewhere to have that creative collaboration and decide what the shots are going to be and how it's all going to work. So you can either spend that where only two people in a room are there to do the work, or you can spend it when you've got 100 people on set waiting for you to roll, and you're paying all those people to be there. So it's time much better spent in prep than while you're shooting. So I think it's really all about time is the biggest thing. There are many other advantages though, and I think it's first, it's like getting me and the director on the same page creatively, making sure that I understand what the director wants and what they need, and that we can be very clear on those things. So if for example, you write in a shot list a close-up, right? I might picture in my head, in my mind's eye, a close-up like this, and the director might be picturing it here. And until we've both looked at a photo board and looked at the lens and seen that, we don't know what a close-up really is, or what's exactly in the background, or how much on the eye line is that. And all those little things make a big difference. And you don't want to be having a debate about those on the day. So if you can plan that to the nth degree, you're much better off. So that's a huge advantage. And then the other advantage is the crew morale, which I was talking about. So everybody has a much better time when you're more efficient. Everybody feels like they can do their job better and feels better about that when you have that plan. And then I also take it to the point of getting stills from the whole project, where it kind of pairs up with the photo boards. So I have the DIT or data manager or dailies people produce frame grabs from the movie, and that becomes a photo board log of what we've shot so far. And I can use that on set, and it's all in a shared format, like in a Dropbox or a Google Drive or something, where everybody has access to the photo boards and the shot lists, so that they can look ahead and know what they need to do. The art department can, look at, I'm going to see this wall, but not that wall. Great. I don't need to spend any resources or anything on that wall. So let's just focus here and make this wall look great. But then with the stills, I can show everybody the next day, here's the work we did yesterday. And it makes everybody feel really good about a project that they're working on, and can see their contribution to the project. I can show it on my phone on set, be like, here's the thing that we just did yesterday. Isn't that awesome what we're making? And everybody's like, oh my God, looks great. Like, this is so cool what we're making. And then that gets them motivated for their work that day and the next day and the next day. And it's all kind of a system of preparation and follow through on that gets everybody excited about it, and makes a better product, I think. So
I'm sure it keeps trust really high too, when they're seeing that, like, oh, when we spent that extra time putting those lights there or doing this particular thing, you see it the next day, how good it looks. Is like that trust when you ask, when next tomorrow, when we ask to move the lights over here or over there, there's more of like, okay, I know this is for, like, we're not making junk here. This looks really good.
That too, also for the actors, as well as if he's showing, like you said, everybody has access to the drive. If I know that, hey, when they're doing an ECU or extreme close-up or a close-up, when they're on me, when I hear that now as an actor, I now know if I wasn't already turning it on, let me really turn it on now. So morale, like you said.
You think about like that when we talked to somebody who did Django Unchained, and how Leonardo DiCaprio talked to the cinematographer about, like, where are you going to be at on me on this one? So he knew where to focus his performance at. And I feel like that's got to be really helpful for the actors too, to be able to know exactly where they're to be able to see it. Because not everybody speaks camera language.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good point. And I think a huge part of the prep process is also making that information available in as many modes as possible, because people do consume information in different ways. So we have a written shot list. We have for the people who like to read things, we have photo boards for people who like to see things. And then there's some people who really like to see top-down floor plans. And we have the blocking drawn out in the different camera positions. And like, suddenly that makes it a lot clearer. And I like all three. And depending on the scene and the moment, I'll refer to all three of them to help, figure out what exactly are we going to see, and what's the best way to structure the day, and all that. And to your point about moving lights and putting in all that extra work, I'm remembering a moment and earning the trust. Remembering a moment on Eyes of My Mother where it was near the end of the shoot, and I think we were doing like a night exterior, and we had a 4K, our biggest light. We were like, this is our big light. And it was, and we had like run a lot of power to it. And it was like at the bottom of this hill. And we the whole time kind of been shooting up and down the hill and up in the woods, back on the hill, whatever. And I remember kind of realizing we're like, about to go shoot this scene on the hill, and all the power was run, and the 4K was at the bottom of the hill. And I was like, oh no, like, we have this shot coming up, and the light really needs to be at the top of the hill. And that means like not only moving the light, but rerunning all this cable, like hundreds of feet of cable. And it was a very small team. So I turned to the Best Electric and I was like, Alec, like, I think we got to move the light up the hill. I'm so sorry. And I hate to do this to you. And he just looked at me, he goes, all right, give me a minute. And he just like went and did it, because he knew like it was the right choice. It was the right thing to do for the moment. And he cared about the film,
Yeah.
and he had seen stills as we were going. And I think we were able to even show footage to the crew throughout that project, because it was a pretty small crew. And we were, so he was able to, stay motivated and just get excited about that and move the cable, and it made that shot in that moment that much better. So.
Well, I wanted to congratulate you all. Well, first of all, Barbarian is awesome. And what I noticed about was there's like you seem to have a signature to your visual style that I immediately picked up on watching the movie. Like some things are just kind of like cookie cutter, paint by number. You could just kind of tell. But there's like, when you watch Barbarian, there's just, I can't put it into words, but it just, like, if I saw something else that you did, I'd be able to say, oh, that's Kuperstein, because I saw Barbarian. You just have a very distinct flavor to it. And on that, I wanted to, there's a trivia thing on IMDb that says, it says it's not officially credited in any way, but Jordan Peele was an invisible hand in shaping the eventual story. Star Georgina Campbell tells IndieWire in an interview that writer-director Zach Kuperstein is good friends with Jordan Peele, and I think he spoke to Jordan Peele a lot while he was writing the film, and Jordan Peele saw an early cut of it as well. So he definitely was kind of part of the essence of the movie. And I attached that trivia to what I just said because that was like, your visual style was something that I think lent to the monkey paw-esque flavor to the film, where it felt like things were very intentional, especially for a horror film, both in its cinematography and the blocking and the subtle spotlights on social issues within the story. But mainly it was like just that, like in a horror film, you just expect a certain kind of, and like cinematography is not like the focus. Your perspective isn't really the important thing. The important thing is usually what's on the camera, not the angle and the blocking and the lighting and everything. And with this movie, it's like an art film disguised as a horror film, and a lot of the ways that monkey paw films are. So I was wondering if you could speak to that at all, because I thought it was interesting that they both came from sketch comedy series on television and then pivoted inexplicably into horror feature film, and very successfully at that. So I was wondering if you had any idea about the Jordan Peele connection, and like if you noticed that, like if you picked up on that about yourself, that you have that there's that intention in your cinematography that comes through.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to speak to there. I think the definitely Jordan was involved. I haven't met him, but I definitely heard from Zach frequently that like he talked to Jordan the other day and told him about something, and he was excited about something, and I'm like, okay, cool, great. There was a shot in particular that Zach and I were very collaborative, but also very interested in debating each other and kind of going head to head at times on creative ideas. And I think we were both very interested in letting the best idea win. And there's a shot early in the movie that Zach was really interested in, and I was like, I hate this shot. Like, why are we doing this? And the shot's in the movie, and it's and Zach, I don't know if this is true, but I believe it because Zach said it. He said he showed Jordan the movie, and he goes, apparently Jordan said, I love that shot. That shot's awesome. It's a shot that I hate. I'm like, all right, well, fine.
I can neither confirm nor deny whether that happened. I'm just saying I talked to a guy, Jordan. He loved it.
So I lost that one, but in a good way. It feels good to have lost those battles and feel like the movie.
What a position to put you in, though. If you want to argue with Jordan Peele,
but no, I think he said something that's very important that most creators and artists should aspire to when you're doing a film. Let the best idea win. It's not always going to be yours. Sometimes you may think it, but it's a collaboration, man. Always collaboration.
Yeah. I just watched an interview with Adam Sandler and Brendan Fraser. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
He corrected it in the interview. He was talking about working on The Whale with Darren Aronofsky, and he said that's why that movie excels so well, is that they had that same kind of relationship where I did not expect Darren Aronofsky to be like, I expected him to be kind of like a Kubrick, a tyrant, and the way Fraser put it was like he said those exact words, let the best idea win. It doesn't matter who it came from.
I love that. Now you were talking about connections earlier here, and I don't know if this is a loose connection. I just have to. I'm gonna make sure because I don't know if he's fixated on eyes or not. Follow me on this one here. Now, is Justin Long?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now he earlier we talked about Mother's Eyes,
Mm-hmm.
Jeepers Creepers. What happens to Justin Long? Eyes out. Barbarian. Eyes out. See what I just did there? What is going on with the eyes, man? You tell me.
Eyes are scary. You know, people get freaked out about their eyes. I mean, I get freaked out about my eyes. It's like this is my whole life right here. So I can't.
Yeah.
All right. And then you had me watching that bold thing before we did this.
Yeah, I say all the time, if I had to choose between deaf or blindness, I'd choose deafness. Easy.
You don't even want to hear what shit people have to say now.
I ain't hearing that shit. I want
like not.
Yeah.
All right, now let me ask you this: the visual style from the film Fincher upstairs, Romney downstairs, which is a beautiful concept. You just really love Romney, don't you?
And Fincher.
I mean, but you love Romney more.
Raimi. Oh, I've been saying Rami my whole life.
Really? Because I've been saying Orchard. Or that's inside joke. Sorry. Okay. So anyway, okay. Fincher upstairs, Raimi downstairs here, which is a beautiful concept. Can you expand on where you think that was best reflected in the film? Because again, when you have these two styles here, like I'll let you answer. You're the cinematographer and counselor, if you will, of egos.
Yeah, I mean, in the film, the first act of the movie with Bill and Georgina in the house, it was very much about like having control and building suspense and just letting it simmer as long as possible. And we looked at I think Mindhunter and Seven and those Fincher movies that are sort of classic, or and he's kind of known for this sort of slow paced intensity, right? And the very subtle camera movement, I think, is also a big part of it. And camera movement that's driven by the actors blocking and feels like an invisible hand. You're not necessarily aware of the camera, right? So that inspired all of the shot design for the first chunk of the film. And then as soon as she goes into the basement and opens the door, the camera starts to pick up speed a little bit, but also intensity, and also disconnects it's not necessarily attached to the characters as much as it was upstairs. And I think the prime moment is when Justin is standing in the cusp of the pink room, and the tape measure gets pulled away from him, and the camera kind of goes nuts, and it's like this super wide angle lens and really close to him, and there's just an intensity of it that you wouldn't really see in a Fincher film, right? And it kind of breaks those rules and just amps things up to this like, whoa, it's like almost a comic book with the camera. And I think the audience hopefully can feel that contrast. And even like the moment when she opens the secret door for the first time and the camera pulls back from her at the door. I remember when we first shot listed it, this is actually, kind of one of those things where it's like you can plan and then you find something on the day where, we were setting up for the shot, and I told the dolly grip, I was like, okay, let's just, creep back, pull back slowly, and that's gonna be a thing. And Zach was like, no, let's do it faster. I'm like, all right, sure, faster. Go a little bit faster. And we go, okay, a little bit faster. He was like, no, like 3 times faster. And I'm like, really? Like you wanted to you wanted to be that fast? And he's like, yeah, that fast. All right, we'll do a take like that, sure. And we just like, really hit the gas on it, and that's definitely the take that's in the movie. And he was totally right. And that like turns the tables, right? That's where the audience has that moment, and where Georgina says nope, and
I love her.
It was awesome that it even speaks to it even more, that the fact that you're emulating 2 different very distinct styles, and then, well, technically 3, because then I'll get into the flashback in a second, but that feels like a whole other cinematic style in itself. But even with that, 3 completely different styles, but it still feels like the same signature on all 3 of them. Like they mesh so well together. You could very much tell that there's something different at play, but somehow the aesthetic still remains the same.
It's a good dance. One of the things he mentioned earlier that I think a lot of people probably, if they haven't seen the film, need to understand is that the house itself is a character, and that's why it plays so well. Like you said, it wasn't character driven as far as the actual person, but the house itself revealing these plots and to seeing these things. And you guys were mentioning Georgina earlier, and I really love her. What was she in Black Mirror, if I'm not mistaken, season 4, if I'm not mistaken? Like, she really lends to it, and like you say, that same shot when the reveal, like when you see it, it's like it's symmetry. It's literally the cinematography, the score, the actress, the story, all being driven at that same time. And to me, that's what's beautiful about film, when you can get those moments like that.
Yeah. And that's all Zach, the director. That's like, you know, his vision. And I feel like he knew each and every one of those parts in advance, and then just got to see that through post, and just any question that anybody had, he would have an answer for it and know exactly why it's got to be that way. And it works. It works really well.
Pre-production, guys, have those pre-production meetings.
All right, for the next question, please be as speak to us as if we know everything about camera. I'll Google what I need to later. I just want the genuine, unfiltered, technical answer to this question, because I genuinely want to know for myself. Those shots, the flashback shots when it cuts to the origin story with Richard Brake as Frank, that wide claustrophobic feeling that is I don't know how it's achieved, because the bars are on the sides of the screen. They're going back to standard, so it's not wide, but it feels wider somehow. It felt like, as far as like film goes, it felt the closest that I've seen to how our natural eyes see. But I Googled this. Our eyes are only 17 millimeters. That's our like natural vision. And I also Googled this. That lens for that was 12 millimeters, correct?
It depends on the shot. We did some shots.
I'm specifically thinking about the grocery store.
Oh, the grocery store. Yeah. I think that was either 12 or 15 millimeter.
So are you just super like a super wide, but just up like right on the subject? Like, what goes into? I don't even know enough to ask the question properly. I'm just hoping you'll save me at some point here and jump in.
Well, the answer is yes. It's a very wide lens close to the subject. That's the trick. But I want to correct something though about the field of view and how eyes work and all that. And it's tricky because eyes don't work like a camera. And this 17 millimeter that you're referring to is specific to a specific format, and is probably just representing an angle of view. And you kind of feel like your angle of view is very wide. Like if I put my hands out here, I can just barely see them in my peripheral, right? But the way eyes work is you're really only perceiving the center of your vision at one time, and your brain is filling in a lot of the rest of it. So the actual angle of view is much tighter, especially in color. You have a concentration of cones in the middle of your retinas that give you a lot more color vision in the center of it, and that's why. Little trick if you're looking at stars and you want to see a star that you can't quite make out. If you look just off to the side of it, it might appear in your peripherals because it'll hit more of your rods, which are more light sensitive, but they're only in black and white. Anyway, so that's sort of the field of view question. Is there's not a number that you can really assign to like what you can actually see at one moment, because it's not analogous to the way a camera works. In addition to that, we have certain amount of control of the depth of field, or not control, but there is some shallowness to the depth of field and where the focus of your vision lies, right? And if I look at my hand here, I can make you guys out of focus, and I can rack focus to you in the background. And what is in focus is actually pretty narrow. And if you were to use a 17 millimeter lens on a 35 millimeter format, which is, I'm guessing, what you're referring to, most things would be in focus, right? And that's not realistic to what the human eye sees as well. So maybe more analogous would be a very long lens, because it's very focused on one thing and has a sort of narrow field of view. But maybe a better analogy for human vision would be larger format. So if you look at like an 8x10 negative, for example, like a big plate negative, 100 millimeter lens is a very wide lens. It still, captures a very wide field of view, but it has a very shallow depth of field. So there might, some people would argue that that's the closest to human vision that we can get, and that's why it's used in photography portrait photography and landscapes, and kind of popularized in that way. But using a camera to make something feel like your eye is just not realistic. So I think, yeah, go ahead. That's it.
And I was gonna say, somewhere there's out there a kid who got a camera for Christmas last year who just told his mom, who just saw this interview, by the way, I think I want to paint again. I'm just gonna paint. If somebody's colors, you put them on there, that's it. There's no rack and focus with my. But no, I love that you said it. And as much as we know, we probably got like what 35% of that made sense to us.
But yeah, most of. But I got about. I'll say 70.
I was at 75. I was trying to make you feel better.
Oh,
okay, you all said we both.
Feel worse.
Oh, thank you. So
what didn't you get? I want to make it clear.
Oh, no, we got it. But again, for our film school audience out there, we want them to really know that again, you didn't learn this overnight. It takes time to do this. When you get your camera, you learn depth of perception, field of view. You know what things work and don't work, and you have to try stuff to get results. And I think that's the most important thing.
What made you guys?
I have to give some credit to a course I took in college called Science of Cinematography, taught by Gordon Arkenberg, and he retaught that class during the pandemic on Zoom, and it was incredible. And to go back and relearn all that stuff, but there is so much science in cinematography and so much physics involved in image making, and it whether or not it informs the actual making of images is hard to say, but I find it really useful and nice to kind of know how it all works, from the light emitting from a source to being captured onto a recording medium to being displayed for an audience. I think that understanding every piece of that pipeline is critical to have control over it. So,
yeah, I read how you guys did the that shot where it seamlessly transitions into the car.
Yeah.
That in that same flashback sequence, that was just all. It was just all done. Like you had to actually specialize the rig that the camera is on to get it through the window to seamlessly, have that one steady shot from him walking out of the house. Like with something like that, I don't know what the capabilities of the camera that you guys used is, but going from like extreme exposure outside to the inside of a car, like how do you work with something like that where it just the lighting and everything stays consistent as it's going inside the car?
That's an interesting question. I think nobody's asked me about the exposure on that shot yet, but I think I don't know if we did an exposure rack. Normally I would just rack exposure and just change the iris during the shot. But there were it was too clunky to be able to do that, or I couldn't touch the camera because I was holding the gimbal, and it was a whole thing. So I feel like probably just let it live, because the car had big windows. We were exposed for the exterior, and it was he's silhouetted, so it's not like I needed detail on his face or anything inside the car. So I guess exposure wise, we probably just left it as it was.
I know what it was. Invisible hand. And the only reason I'm saying that, because you two motherfuckers trying to make me feel like I'm not smart anymore. I heard you say it earlier, and you said earlier. I was waiting for the perfect time to say invisible hand. And this whole interview, now there have been 3 invisible hands. Thank you. I appreciate it. Now, for an independent horror film with a budget of under $5 million, the location and set design was really, we have to say, impressive. I mean, It looked like every penny was spent well. So watching the house in the neighborhood transform, while now there were some shots in location in Detroit, the actual neighborhood was built from scratch on a Bulgarian farm. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true.
Yes. I want to be right.
Okay, continue.
Okay, well, I mean, I didn't know. I thought it was going to be like, oh yeah, the Bulgarian farm, but now I'll continue. 1357. Now, is it true that the only digital effects shot in the movie is the grass that was used in the flashback sequence? Is that correct?
No, that's not true.
I knew it. I knew it.
That we said the IMDb is like 7 for 10.
Yeah, but I know Zach really harked on that because it was the most complicated visual effects thing to do, because making the texture of the grass was very hard to do right, and we saw maybe 4 or 5 iterations of that, and we looked at it in the color grade, and we're like, it just doesn't look like grass, it looks like smudges on it. So, and then I think they had to like spray paint it, because I think there was a timing thing, like the sod got laid, and then it was a few days until we got to shoot, and since it didn't take root and there was nobody watering it, it turned brown, so they were like trying to spray it green. It didn't look good. So I think that specifically was very complicated, but it's not the only visual effects shot in the movie. There are a handful of, as there always are, little visual effects like paint outs and fixes and things like that. And but the biggest thing was the fall from the silo, but only the fall from the silo. And I think it's important to recognize that the stuff on top of the silo was done practically rebuilt the top of the silo on a stage. And instead of having a green screen around it, we used black fabric with holes poked in it and lit from behind to make the distant city lights at the horizon level. So all of that is done in camera. There's no computer doctoring for any of that. Only for falling off the side of the silo, we did that on green screen.
Yeah, I thought that was so interesting in one of the interviews with you that I read, where you were talking about that horizon and shifting it to always keep it level with the camera. Like that's something like that takes so much, like, to think about that before the fact and not after the fact in post-production. That's
the science of cinematography. Take the class, man.
Well, speaking of science, this was another thing that I was wondering about the science of that cut from Frank watching the woman at the grocery store to watching her at her home. It's very similar blocking. Was there like on-set calculations happening to achieve that, or was that like just getting it as close as possible and fixing it in post?
Yeah, there was no fixing in post for that. That was just getting it as close as possible, and the calculations were just measuring the camera position. Luckily, we shot both of those shots on the same day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. But they were very different rigs. It wasn't like we could keep the camera in the same place and move the car. We did have to de-rig and set up something different. But we took very careful measurements of where the lens was in relation to the window, how far away it was from him and the other window, and then looking at frames of it from before. We took photos of the monitor and lined it up so like the crosshairs are in exactly the same spot, and like the left right edges of the frame were in exactly the same place for the starting position. So then I remember as we were framing it up, because to execute that move was actually kind of complicated. It's on a slider on a dolly, so it's slide back out of the window as we start dollying over, and then slide and boom up and look down, and there's reflections in the window we had to deal with. We put up a whole lot of black fabric behind the camera to kill those reflections. It was, and I think that was near the end of the shoot. I feel like that was one of our last days, if not, it was close to the end.
I loved it. I liked it because it wasn't. It aside from being just a really cool cut, those two shots. I think it conveyed really well that feeling of like when you have a problem, when you're like say like you're an alcoholic. I like cigarettes a lot, even though I shouldn't smoke them. And a lot of the times it's what it feels like I'll go to bed with the guilty feelings. I'm not going to smoke tomorrow. But then it's like, before I know it, how did I end up at the convenience store to get another pack of cigarettes? And it struck me in that way, where it's like, this is this problem that he has. And it's almost like a subconscious thing that's happening outside of his don't even consider it a choice. He saw her at the grocery store. Now he's at her house. There was a stylistic cut, but it seemed to play into the character development too, which I love when everything is working to serve the story.
Yeah. Wow. I'm so glad you said that. That's one of those moments where I should say that was intentional, but I can't. And I'm really glad that it hit you that way. I like that interpretation of it. It's cool.
You've come a long way from someone in the audience saying, no, I can't watch this. See, he's breaking down everything you do now. You've come a long way from that.
Another thing I was kind of curious about was that point of view shot from Justin Long's character, which I think I read somewhere that was another kind of subtle point of contention between you and Zach as far as like doing the POV stuff in a horror film. But it was used sparingly, and I think it was used well. But right after he sees the breastfeeding video and he holds the knife out, it was just it looked like, there's point of view shots that I've seen in horror movies, and this felt more like I was playing a video game. Like, you could see both of his hands on the flashlight and the thing, and I'm thinking like, all right, this is low. This isn't like Marvel budget, so they would have probably just put the hands in post or whatever. So I was wondering how you guys accomplished that. If there was like a stunt double for Justin Long's other arm, or if the rig was like slightly over.
Before you answer this, can you please tell me, was it a body rig? Please tell me it was a body rig.
No,
was it like a
body rig?
Damn it! I thought it was a body rig. Damn.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's good. Well, first I should say, just to clarify, the point of contention between me and Zach about POVs is more about like looking at a room when a character walks into it, or like moving down the hall. And I think that, he was probably right about it. I think there's something really nice about like looking down the hall and seeing what's coming. But for me, the horror comes from what you don't see, and for him, it comes from what you're about to see. And I think that was sort of an interesting difference between us. But with this shot, it was not a contentious thing at all. It was a fun, like, let's do this thing. And it was supposed to be a body rig. That was the plan. And we were going to do so a lot of the influence for the Frank sequence was a movie called Angst, which is an Austrian film from the late 80s. And it's have you seen it?
I read up on it when I was getting ready for this interview. So that's why I asked about the body rig, like the shots and the frame, like this and that. So there you go. I did my research, man.
Yeah, there you go. So that was a huge influence for the Frank sequence, and we wanted to kind of call back or ahead. I forget which happens first, to be honest, but call ahead to the Frank sequence visually and say like, hey, this is gonna become part of the style. And we wanted to do things that either were body rig or felt like body rigs with the stuff, especially close to him in the grocery store. Like that could have been a snorri cam, and we saw a lot of that in Angst, but we also saw a lot of just like wide angle, close following stuff and floating around like that. So that was the influence for that. And we were going to do even more of that kind of stuff with Justin in the tunnels, especially once he gets the gun. And there was this really cool rig I saw on Instagram that I really wanted to use. We didn't end up doing because we just didn't have time or money, to figure it out. But it's like a snorri cam that has the camera on like a pivot attached to like to a prop. They were using a gun, but I guess it could be anything. And the guy in the video, he was like swinging the gun around so that the camera would turn into the POV of the gun and then like pull the gun back around closer to him to like do this. And the camera would then swing around and be attached to him moving around like that. Oh. And I was like, that's so incredible. We got to do something like that. And I think our camera was a little too big and it wasn't something we had access to in Bulgaria. And I was like, we could make it, but I just didn't have time to make it. Anyway,
give me some PVC pipes.
yeah. And actually on Eyes of My Mother, we used PVC pipe to do a snorri cam rig for one shot in that. So I was like, I could make this, it seems like something that'd be fun to do, just no time to do it. So anyway, we didn't end up making that, but we still wanted to do this kind of direct POV thing where you see his hands. And it was as simple as I just put the camera on his shoulder and kind of held it on his shoulder while he had his arms out. So that was it.
Well, it looked great. So in your face, like rig makers, we don't need you anymore. Like,
I want one. Okay. All right. A lot of the film takes place in very low light situations. And of course, if anybody will tell you, that's one of the first things I think they talk about in film school is I have this when I try to teach people film, or at least when they're starting out, when they ask what kind of camera should they get, I say, well, think about this. I look at my whole body as the camera, and the eyes are my lens and things of that nature, and try to make it work that way. Now, I read that you actually instructed the actors on how to light the scenes. We talked about this earlier, practically with whatever device the character was using in order to avoid unnatural looking backlighting, which is horrible. It makes films look so damn cheesy. What are the biggest challenges to shooting in conditions like that, and how do you normally know that you would be able to work around them?
I selected the camera and lenses knowing that I would have to do that. So the Venice I had not used before, but I'd heard great things about, and with the ability to shoot at 2500 ISO without really any noise, I was like, that seems great. And then I tested it and sent it to the colorist, and he was like, you go to 5000 ISO. I'm like, great, I can do that. But he was like, don't go to 10,000 ISO. That would
Jesus Christ.
So 5000 ISO and lenses that open to a 1.5. I was like, all right, that seems like, it'll do it. And then iPhone lights are pretty bright. And we got this, for the flashlight prop, wanted to have control over it and be able to kind of dim it as needed and make it flicker when we wanted to. So the gaffer suggested a little LED. It was called a coin. Was it Ape Labs makes a coin light, and it's got a little remote control, and we were able to build that into the prop flashlight, and then we could dial in the color, and I could remotely turn it on and off, or the gaffer could turn it on and off.
Nice.
So that was pretty sweet to kind of be able to have control over that. But then a lot of the rest of it was. Like you said, directing the actors or working with them. And the AD was really good at this, actually. He was better than I was at helping the actors figure out how to hold the flashlights. He would always do this thing where he'd be like, okay, just hold it like this, like, kind of near the back of your head, like looking like this. And it was perfect because it would hit the side of their face and then bounce off the wall and do this thing. But it was hard for them to understand that and figure it out, but they did, and it worked. And then the other part of it is the gaffer had made another LED thing. He had I also don't know the name of the light, but it was like a circular LED light that he had built a little like a top hat kind of snoot on, and then he had a little like lid on it, and he would stand behind me with the camera. He would stand right behind me, and wherever the actors were pointing the flashlight, he would just match that hitting the wall with his little LED. So he would kind of track their movement, and that would just amplify the bounce coming back at them. But it had to be shaped so we didn't see the direct light or camera shadow or anything like that. And then he had the lid, so when they turn around and point the flashlight in the other direction on their back, there was no light. So he would close that up, and it would fall to silhouette, and we would just see the light kind of spilling down the tunnel. So I thought that was ingenious, and really, I can't take much credit for any of it, but
I think that's amazing. Did I hear you say it was some of these things were lit with would you say an iPhone?
Yeah.
So that's what they mean by that commercial when they say made with an iPhone. They just meant the lighting. I knew they weren't talking about that other shit.
Oh, no, those cameras are
man, stop! Don't you fall for that, man. You've been on board with me for a while. Stop it.
All right. Well, going back to what you're saying about like the point of view shots, or where you're seeing like what's down the hall or what's in the room. You guys did such a good job with like the best comparison I could make is like watching 80s horror films and then watching them the same horror film digitally remastered, and for some reason it doesn't feel as scary. And I had watched this documentary about like the advantages of VHS back in the day, like watching stuff on VHS. Was that like once we got like DVD and Blu-ray, then now we could see what was in those corners, and we could see what was like in the graininess that we couldn't see before. And somehow you guys achieved that same like feeling of I don't feel like I'm being cheated. I don't feel like this isn't lit well enough. It's lit intentionally, but it's in such a way that I'm staring at something and I can't make out what's in the shadows. And you don't see that a lot in like when you said in one of the interviews that you avoided backlighting and use it and like lighting the surroundings around them unnaturally. I think that played so well into the shots under the house, making them that was where the suspense came from for me, was not being able to really make out what was coming until it was too late. You got jump scares like usually I scoff at jump scares, but the jump scares in that were earned because it's literally coming out of nowhere.
Did you jump at all?
I jumped twice.
Okay, I just want to see. I want to see what the
well,
jump count
I mean,
was.
You have to be a heartless, cold-blooded, humanless person
when you jumped.
When Skarsgård is getting headbanged. Like,
yeah, I'll jump for that. I'll
that was like kudos to the casting director on that, because that was such fantastic casting on having Skarsgård play that
Pennywise, baby,
because you expect him like, oh,
right.
This guy, he always plays the baddie, and
then he gets fucked up. You're like, wait a minute, so I've been wrong for an hour? Yeah.
You are responsible for abolishing the church. Thank you, by the way. I read in an article in IndieWire that you suggested using the the existing silo that was on location for one of the final scenes in the film. And initially it was intended to take place on the roof of the church. And we kind of touched on this a few times in the interview, but if you could speak on it for that specific scenario, how that played out, what it was like working with a writer and director who was open to things like that, like down to shifting the location of the film's climax.
Yeah, I mean, it was great, but I didn't know that going into it. I had a feeling, but we got there. Well, first of all, we kind of started prep a little bit behind schedule, and Zach has talked about the kind of financing snafu that happened and all that. But as a result, they had to start building the set before we got there, which was pretty scary because, we didn't know if the houses were going to land in the right place. And there were so many houses to build, and we didn't know which one was going to be the hero house and how we were going to kind of build the neighborhood around that. So when we got there, very first day in Bulgaria, we go to see the farm set and see how it's coming along. And we're kind of standing there and trying to piece together like how, you know, where's Frank's house going to be? Where are the other houses going to be? How are we going to have the car drive up? Where are the cops going to drive away from? All that. And part of that is, where's the church going to go? And we're sitting there looking down the street, and it's like, okay, well, it seems like down at the end of the block that way should be the church, right where that silo is. And I was like, yeah, you know, we probably got to block that silo. Okay, interesting. And then I kind of had a moment, and there's like stairs kind of leading up the silo, and I was like, should I say it? Okay, I guess. Like, what if we did the church at the silo? And there was this pause, and I was like, oh my God, I said the wrong thing. I'm fired. Like, this is the worst.
This guy didn't even show up to the interview on time. Now he's trying to change the ending of the movie.
Exactly. And I was really lucky that Zach was receptive to that. And he was just like, no, that's great. It's a silo. Let's do it. And he just kind of ran with it. And then I literally ran up the silo to test it out and see if, like, you know, was going to collapse or something. It was all rusty metal, and it's actually an oil tank, so you could actually look inside of it, but you don't want to stick your head too deep in it because it's just full of oil fumes. It was empty, but you know, residual oil fumes in there. And the stairs along the side were pretty rickety, and they ended up hiring an engineering team to like weld some extra supports on it to make it safer for the actors, but they still decided we couldn't have the actors on top of the silo. That wasn't going to be allowed. So that's why we had to rebuild the top of it on a stage. And then we did one shot with a stunt double on top of it. It's the drone shot that kind of comes over the top there and sees the bodies down below.
Nice.
But
it'd be so funny if he came back like months later. Is like, yeah, so Jordan Peele finally saw the hey, wish it would have ended on a church.
Yeah, it's so funny. I was going to ask this before we move on.
I'm sorry, but yeah, kudos on the silo, because that was
awesome.
because that was like one, like a horror film ending in a church could have borderline cliche, especially with Candyman just coming out previously.
About that. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there were a lot of problems to solve too, because it was like, it can't just, you know, part of it was in the church. There was like inside the church, the homeless man had his like his hideout. So we had to figure out, well, is it going to be then inside the silo? And we scouted a bunch of locations to try to make it look like the inside of it, like a curved space. And they're like, no, I guess it could just be next to it. So we kind of used that building next to it as the exterior, and then cheated the interior elsewhere. And that the geography of that all had to make sense. So you know, it still had to be worked out. It wasn't like, you know, oh, it's a perfect substitute, but yeah, it meant some rewrites, which I was grateful that Zach was interested in doing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I was going to say, before we move on, other than cast and crew taking a break to stick their head deep in the little thing to get the oil valve fumes, hey man, I'm taking a quick break. Other than that, what's your favorite memory from the actual production itself, whether it was on camera, behind camera, maybe someone you met, something you taught, something you learned? What's your favorite memory one of the favorite memories from your production, from that memories?
It was so much fun. I don't know.
Tell us, man. Is there a story that you can or can't or maybe shouldn't tell us without mentioning any names? I mean, just go for it, man.
Oh man, I don't know.
Damn it!
I just see like smashing Bill's head in the wall was pretty great. Doing the prosthetics were just so incredible, and like that was pretty early on, and I think that was the first day we saw the mother prosthetics, and there was a lot of dread about that because we were recommended these Bulgarian guys who do the prosthetics. Their English was not great. They were both named Lucy, and we were like, what's going on? And we visited their studio, and we were like really impressed with their other work. But the film hinges on like the prosthetics looking good, and it's like, how are we gonna, like, what if we show up and it just like isn't there? And they never showed us a test beforehand. And I know Zach was like, you know, having so much anxiety about this because the movie really it matters, like whether the prosthetics look good. So it's like in our first week, and we get you know, go to the into the tunnel, and we're getting ready to kill Bill's character, and I remember seeing Matt, who played the mother, walk onto set for the first time, and that was just pretty awesome because it really, like, I don't know, it looked so real, and it was just like right there, and yeah,
it's where relief meets excitement at the same time. Relief, excitement, yeah,
yeah, exactly, and everybody wanted to take pictures with him, and I got some great photos of that with like the Bill's head smashed into the wall, and it was a good time. And then
Well,
another actually kind of gory moment that was fun was and a lot of stuff was fun with Justin. He just had a great time on set, made a really good vibe on set. It was so much fun to work with. He was constantly like trying to learn Bulgarian phrases between takes. But there's the moment that got cut out of the film, and I know Zach has talked about this, but it's when the mother takes a rat from the side of the room and bites its head off, and then like regurgitates it into Justin's mouth, and that whole thing. So I had a blast shooting that. That was really fun.
Yeah, I can imagine. I had a feeling that even the baby feeding scene to Justin Long, I feel like there had to be some chuckles behind camera on that one. And that I grabbed a still of the moment that Skarsgård, the bashing scene. I grabbed a still from that, so I had to just arrow key frame by frame through that to find the perfect moment. And usually like not special effects, but just moments like that, horrific moments like that where prosthetics or effects are in use, when you slow it down or lighten it up or frame by frame it, the horror dissipates. But it was the opposite with that moment. Frame by frame was even, don't frame by frame that moment. It is even more horrific. Every little, like at one point I saw an eyeball, another point I saw a mouth, like just the like awe-struck horror of somebody's mouth, and then it was more terrifying, slowed down, sped up, and lightened up. So
That's true, yeah.
kudos.
Actually,
he hasn't slept since.
And that was literally I'm guessing that was something that was just that there was no bill in there. That was just a mold of him that mother could slam against the wall as hard as she wanted to.
Yeah, so we did it with there were multiple phases of the prosthetic, and then also we used real bill to hit like a soft pad in the wall for the first one. So I was there with the camera pretty close to him, and we were trying to match the movement of the head into the wall and do it pretty frantically and repeatedly so that we could hide cuts in there. So so we did it with Bill's head going into like a soft pad just to start. And then there were 3 other levels of his head getting smashed, and we did the same movement with all 3 versions of it and hiding the cuts.
What was the camera protection like on that? Just to make, because I'm pretty sure he's gotten blood on what, 2 cameras now? 3? Yeah. So what was the camera protection like on that? Like to make sure nothing. Look at that, kid. See, film school.
Yeah. I had like a poncho on, like a plastic poncho that you saw in that photo. So.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us about Barbarian. We have like 2 more questions for you. But before we move on from that, just want to let people know that Barbarian is now available to stream in most places, from Prime to HBO Max and Vudu or Fandango. Just Google it and check it out. Beyond, straight from there, you've given so much in like very, very valuable knowledge for aspiring filmmakers. But if there's anything else that you'd like to share for the specifically aspiring cinematographers, something that they should know, just hitting the ground running.
You are what you say you are. So if you say you're an aspiring cinematographer, then you're not a cinematographer. And there's no reason to say you're aspiring when you start, because as soon as you shoot something, you're a DP. So as soon as you can say I'm a DP, people will believe you. And whether or not you're good at it, especially if you're in film school, it doesn't matter, because you'll start shooting stuff and then you'll get good at it. So I think that as soon as you can like own the title and own what you want people to think of you as, you will become that.
Beyond Barbarian, do you have anything else in the works that you'd like to let the audience know about?
Yeah, I shot a documentary the first part of this year. I can't talk too much about it, but I'm very excited about it. It's going to be a doc series. I don't think I'm allowed to give details.
It's okay.
But,
hey, listen, we've got how many? 200, almost 200 interviews now. We've not broken one NDA, have we?
Yeah, no.
And I can say there's another feature I shot that just wrapped literally a couple days ago. It's called The Dating Game, with Anna Kendrick both starring and directing the film. It was her directorial debut, and she was absolutely fantastic to work with. And the film is it's a true crime thriller, sort of centered around it's about a serial killer from the 70s who was pretty prolific and had maybe 130 victims. Pretty horrible stuff he did, but he made an appearance on the dating game TV show in the midst of that. So the film is about him, but it's really about the woman who's the contestant on the show that is played by Anna, and it's the story of the lead up to the taping of the episode, the taping of the episode itself, and then the date that they go on afterwards, as well as interspersed with vignettes of other victim stories. So I'm very excited about that. I'm really proud of it so far. And, we just wrapped literally on Friday. So
I cannot wait to see that.
Yeah,
I mean, can you imagine him going on the show? So what are you looking for? Nothing long term?
I've watched the YouTube documentary about that guy. That's an incredible story. I can't wait to see what they do with it. And I'm sure when people see Barbarian, the true film connoisseurs, people that really appreciate filmmaking, they won't just be looking up the director and the actors. They'll be looking up Zach Kuperstein too to see what else you're doing. So even though you can't share what the documentary is today, I'm sure that they'll find out because they'll be following your work after they see everything else you've done.
And feel free when it comes out to come back. You're a friend of the show now. So I mean, hey, when you can talk about it, we love to talk about it.
I do like to talk about things, so that would be great. I love that.
All right. Before we do say goodbye, it doesn't have to be film related, but are there any parting words that you'd like to leave the audience with? Just like you said, we went through the pandemic, we went through this, that, other. Any advice or any quote or anything you want to tell the world before we leave?
Oh man,
it's a big place.
It's a big place. It's funny you say that because I have this this little sticker thing on my monitor here. It's taped here. I can't. There it is. Let's see if you can read that. Oh, come on.
Read that?
Damn cameras. 1 second. Let me get the focus again. Hold on. There it is.
Okay. We're getting there. Help make the world a better place for you and for me and the entire human race. Awesome, man.
During the pandemic, this was on I was taking a walk with the dog, and there was one of those tear off kind of posters, and there were a bunch of these on it, and I was like, I like that, I'll take that one. So that sits in front of me right now, and I among other love notes from my fiance, and another one that says, "You are a super pooper scooper," but that's help make the world.
That means you're always picking up shit, man, and making the world a better place. I love that. There we go.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I know we went a little bit longer than discussed, so thank you for that as well, and for sharing the pictures, or not sharing the pictures. And yeah, thank you very much, man. I really appreciate it.
All right, have a good night.